Hello everyone, Professor Kurzluck here. So I wanted to make another video thinking about maybe some of the potential ramifications of the US-Iran war, especially when it comes to domestic support and electoral politics. So in political science, one of the most well-known patterns of public opinion is something called the rally around the flag effect. This concept, which I'm sure you've heard before, you've probably heard it in political science courses, you may have encountered it in the news. This concept refers to this short term or a short term really increase in public support for political leaders during moments of international crises, maybe war, or national threat. So the term itself was popularized by the political scientist John Muller in the early 1970s. Muller observed that when dramatic international events occur, especially events involving the United States, presidential approval ratings often increase temporarily as citizens rally behind the national leader. So the idea itself is fairly simple and straightforward. When a country faces an external threat, citizens oftentimes put aside their internal political disagreements. Instead, they focus on, instead of focusing on partisan conflict or domestic political differences, people emphasize national unity. So, because the president is both the head of government and the symbolic head of state in the US system, the president becomes the focal point of the national unity and the national identity. So, as a result of this, presidents often experience a temporary boost in approval rating during the early stages of international crises. Various research, really more than one study, pretty big scholarship here. Research suggests these increases can average around 5 to maybe even up to 10, 5 to 7, 5 to 10 percentage points. They may have even at times higher jumps. We saw this after September 11th. And so one of the most dramatic examples occurred after the terrorist attacks in 2001 of September 11th. President George W. Bush's approval ratings jumped to roughly 90%. Some polls that I use in class show that his approval rating jumped to 94% as Americans rallied behind the government during really the national emergency that occurred after 9/11. Political scientists have identified several conditions that tend to produce these strong rally effects. First, the event usually needs to be international in nature. Domestic political controversies rarely generate the same huge jump in polling, huge jump in executive support. Second, the event must be sudden and dramatic, such as a military attack, a terrorist attack like September 11th, or an international crisis where citizens can really get behind the leader and have this national identity. And third, there must be limited criticisms from political elites. Um, excuse me. This is especially true in the early stages of the event, when opposition leaders temporarily reduce criticism of the president. It reinforces the sense that the country should present a unified front against that external threat, that external force. Um, it is important, though, to understand that this rally around the flag effect usually is only temporarily, As the crisis continues, political divisions usually occur. If they existed before, they reappear, or new political divisions will appear. Public opinion might become more polarized, and presidential approval ratings then will go to their previous level. So the important thing here is that that initial rally around the flag effect is only short term. We see this in democracies, we see this in authoritarian regimes, we see that even in autocracies there's a rally around the flag, approval rating bump after invasion, after a terrorist attack, after an attack. So, in other words, these rally around the flag effects are not permanent increases in presidential popularity or presidential power. Instead, they are short-term shifts in public opinion during moments of really national stress. So, the rally around the flag concept does become interesting when we apply it to current events around the world today. So the ongoing conflict between the United States, Israel, and Iran has rapidly escalated in what is appearing to be a regional conflict. We've seen Iran attack in retaliation multiple countries in the region. The U.S. and Israel are continuing the bombing campaign. So we have seen this escalation over the past several days. The conflict has already produced significant geopolitical consequences. Military escalation has expanded across multiple regions, multiple areas of the region, I guess we could say. We know it's disrupted air travel, and it has raised concerns about energy market and regional stability in general. For political scientists, a key question then is whether the crisis will produce a rally around the flag effect here in the United States as the war escalates in Iran. Historically, international conflicts often generated temporary increases in presidential approval rating as Americans, as citizens, rallied behind leadership. When Americans perceive or have perceived in the past a serious external threat, they sometimes will again prioritize national unity over partisan disagreements. So this rally around the flag. So that doesn't mean it occurs automatically, though. It depends heavily on political conditions. So there has been some discussion in the media. I've seen some news articles about, okay, will Trump's approval rating increase or decrease? Will it increase because of this rally around the flag effect? Or will it decrease as Americans are frustrated that there's another military confrontation in the Middle East? So we know that it's not guaranteed to have this rally around the flag effect. And when we think about will it happen, one key factor is there elite consensus? If major political leaders from both parties support the government's response to a crisis, the rally effect tends to be stronger. But if political elites immediately divide along partisan lines, the rally effect may be weaker or may not occur or happen at all. So in the current Iran conflict, political reactions inside the United States have already shown pretty significant signs of division. For example, members of Congress have debated resolutions attempting to limit the president's military authority in the conflict. We saw a war powers resolution vote yesterday, March 4th. This all highlights this ongoing disagreement about U.S. involvement. So right there, political scientists are saying, well, there's already this division in elites. There's already this crack in consensus. So this outpouring of early political disagreement can reduce the likelihood of a strong rally effect, especially because those in the opposition party might not support, one, the military strikes, and two, they're not being signaled from party leadership that, hey, we should get behind this. So we see that crack, we see that division within the elites. So another important factor that political scientists would point to is public polarization. We know that modern American politics is far more polarized than it was during many earlier international crises. Because of this polarization, citizens may be less likely to suspend partisan disagreements, grievances they have against the Trump administration, even if there is a national security event, a national security crisis, or an ongoing war. Those grievances with the administration are not being set aside that maybe they would have been in the past in a less partisan time. And so for all of these reasons, the Iran conflict presents an interesting real-time test of this rally around the flag theory. Political scientists will be watching several really key indicators closely. Looking at the presidential approval ratings, will there be a bump? Thus far, we haven't really seen that. We haven't, and when we look at is the war popular, it's actually pretty unpopular among Democrats, which is maybe not surprising, but if for a rally around the flag effect, maybe that is surprising. Independents, also very unpopular. Republicans, the Trump base, it is popular, but for a rally around the flag effect, remember, we need more than just the president's party. We can also pay attention to media coverage of the conflict. We can pay attention to elite political consensus or disagreements. We're probably seeing more disagreements now than agreements. And so we'll be looking at all of these things to follow public opinion polling about the war. If approval ratings rise significantly, and criticism temporarily declines, that would suggest a rally effect is occurring. If public opinion remains sharply divided, if partisanship remains sharply divided, it may indicate that modern political polarization is weakening the rally around the flag phenomenon. Like many other pieces of political science and public policy, we are really entering a new era of our understanding of how electoral politics works, how public policy works. So the rally around the flag effect may just be another piece of that larger ongoing transformation. So the rally around the flag effect reminds us that presidential power and the executive power is shaped not only by institutions, but also by public opinion during moments of crisis. Historically, Americans have often rallied behind the president when the country faces an external threat. But whether that pattern still holds true today in our highly polarized environment is really open for debate and open for question. So we'll have to see over the next several days how the Trump approval rating and approval rating for the Middle East conflict changes. Thank you.